no, I'm going to do something with the suffering. I will let life take me out, not me. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I was just, as much as I was anticipating the death, not in a good way, like I was like hoping for it, but I was, I was anticipating the death because I thought it was happening or it was going to happen. As much as that was the case, I wasn't going to let it be my hand. I was going to let it be something else. Yeah. Mine is to make money off of doing something that actually is not unethical. I think that my cause is ethical. I think that educating people on this stuff is ethical, especially making sure that all the stuff that I say is vetted. During that time period, I took a biochemistry course fully, and that's not the only course I plan to do. It's just I'm so busy now because the channel is growing that I've had some stagnation. I haven't been able to learn more. That's why people know me as the biochem guy, right? It's mostly what I talk about. But of course, later down the line, I hope that it expands beyond that. But I took one of those, got the content vetted, again, did research papers on every lesson just to make sure I knew it. Like, I'm very rigorous with how I learn things. It's one thing to like watch a video, but it's another thing to actually study study it like you're in school. Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, and that's what I do. Unfortunately, you can get these for free now. You don't need to go to university to get these courses. They post them online for their online students, and it's for free. So you don't have to go into debt for it. So I would get all that information and then get it vetted by Bart. I made sure I was like, I'm going to get a hold of him. I'm going to make sure I get in contact with him. I'm dedicated, and I did it. And so anyway, that's what I've been doing recently. It's been successful so far. I mean, the progress I've made is something that I never would have anticipated ever. But yeah, here I am. That is my story. 45 minutes later. Sorry.
No, that's so good. That's so good. Actually, you just answered one of my questions. I was going to ask you how exactly you studied, because you're not a university student, but you just do it at home on your own.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is with YouTube and these other things like even ChatGPT, the thing about them is that they are tools and therefore they can be abused. And a lot of people look at them as dangerous because they can be abused. But you have to remember that a tool is not in and of itself a bad thing. You just have to know how to use it properly. And so with YouTube, I thought, okay, well, yeah, there's a lot of people making a lot of videos that pretend to know what they're talking about. But what if I looked up like biochemistry course or something, and you'd be shocked at like how many there are in a row when you look them up. They're like full courses, and then you look at who posted them, and they're university professors from their university campus. And you're like, well, why would you pay for the information then if you could just get it right here? The problem is that the only thing that you're really paying for maybe is if you yourself are not someone that is really good at teaching yourself things with lectures. Then you could benefit from actually taking a course because you can get personalized care and personalized teaching. Like if you have questions, you can specifically ask that teacher or professor, right? That's something that you
motivating as well to have accountability. For most people, for most people that don't have that, it's very easy to when you do anything at home. Like that's why home gyms are not as effective as going to the gym, where you have to actually physically go there and do it. Because otherwise, usually like home gym usually become indoor clotheslines,
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I didn't think about that because you're right. Most people don't have that self-discipline to actually. The reason that I have that with respect to, learning something that most people would think is boring is, first of all, I actually have a motive for it. Like I have suffered the consequence of ignorance a little bit, I think, especially when it comes to diet and stuff, because I do have a theory. Yeah. I have a theory that my diet growing up probably maybe had something to do with the development of this condition. Not in full. I think that it was just the way that diet affected me is different than how it affects other people. But I think my manifestation was still perhaps a manifestation of poor diet. Anyway, so that's one reason is because I actually suffered what I believe to be a consequence of, poor lifestyle, poor diet, just ignorance in general. It made me aware of how ignorant I was about the world itself. and how much my generation is, because I'm one of them, but now in terms of how I think, not really, because of everything that's happened to me, but also because you take for granted, I think in a way, this might sound weird, people take for granted boredom. Because like I had no life. Like I couldn't do anything. Now you go insane when you're staring up at the ceiling, not able to move and not able to do anything, not able to talk to anyone for 18 hours a day, every day, and until you go to sleep. And so I thought, well, man, I need to do something. And so
people don't understand just how difficult it is to do nothing all day.
Yeah, exactly.
It drives you nuts.
Yeah. And that's what happened to me. And so I thought, well, once again, with the work ethic that was inculcated into me, I wasn't going to waste my time playing video games or something. Like I wasn't going to feel like if I can do something, I'm going to do it. And so that's when I started to look into health and stuff. And so now I've actually just garnered a passion for it. And so that's also keeping me, motivated to learn more, like statistical inference and stuff like that. Relearning all of the math that I kind of forgot after school. I was really, really good at math. Like I was one of the top of my class. And then now I can't do basic stuff. And it's like, I don't like the idea of that. I want to relearn everything. And so that's another thing that's keeping me motivated. But I think maybe I just have an ability to teach myself more than other people do. I think I've noticed that the more I keep trying to teach things to other people, it's whenever I start to try and teach to them the topics, do I realize how difficult it actually is to teach people things, even yourself things. And I go, wow, like, okay, it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to teach it. So now I'm starting to realize, like, me typing out all the lessons and like learning them that way, it's like most people don't have that they don't have that ability. And I'm saying that in the least narcissistic way possible. I'm not saying like, yeah, I'm just better than everyone, right? I'm just saying, like, I never realized that until people started commenting on the fact that they're like, oh yeah, well, I took biochemistry, but I feel like I know a lot less than you do about it. And I'm like, well, first of all, that might not be your fault at all. It might be your teacher's fault or something, who knows? We know the quality and integrity of university professors nowadays, but it could just be because some people might be natural learners as opposed to others. It might just take them longer. And so I think that's something that
everyone has a different learning curve, and there are different methods, different ways to learn as well. Some people like yourself might be very easy for you to just sit down and write things out and just read things and go on by yourself. Other people might need instruction. Other people might need, podcasts and, listening, just because we learn, basically most people grow up listening. Listening is a really good tool for most people because, that's how we learn to speak. That's how we learn to do most things. That's how we learn music. That's how we learn other things. So in general, people don't understand there are different ways to learn and different methods are going to work for different people. I think, like yourself, like teaching, you realize how difficult it is, but, teaching, you also learn a lot as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. You actually, in many ways, you can teach while you're teaching other people a certain topic. You're actually subconsciously, sometimes you're further teaching yourself. That's right. So like it makes you know the topic even more than you did beforehand. And that's one of the things that I tried. That's the really, it's a serendipitous effect of doing these videos. First of all, they were designed to entertain and educate people, of course. But the other thing that it does is it keeps my mentality sharp. I actually look forward to doing, because to do things extemporaneously like that, like it's really good for making sure that you retain the information that you have learned, because you're actually applying it. People will never remember what they learned from high school if they don't have to apply it. And nowadays, in the modern world that we live in today, a lot of times you don't have to apply anything at all because everything's like handed to you on a silver platter. Like we don't really have to work for anything or apply ourselves as much as we used to. So a lot of people are just, they might have learned it in high school and they might have gotten straight A's on whatever, but it's like it's not going to be that way years after high school if you don't ever have to apply yourself. And so that's another thing that's actually the videos themselves are not just benefiting other people according to them, they're actually benefiting me from my own experience. Like it's always nice to know that what I'm doing is not just it's helping me too. Yeah.
that's another way to learn too, is speaking it out loud yourself. You reinforce, you listen to what you're saying. You also reinforce what you are studying. So, I know some people that are very good academically. They will actually practice teaching themselves in a mirror because it's a learning tool. Doesn't matter what they're learning. So that helps. Things like that really help, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's writing stuff out, making sure that I articulate it in a way that makes sense. I mean, I'm a natural writer. I've learned now, like it's a writing thing, but also for me to learn the topics, at least the first stage of learning the topic is visually. So if people like draw out the concepts and I see like an animation of it, I go, oh, okay, no, I get that, and then I'll write it out. Yeah, and then I'll write it out, and I'll be like, oh, okay, that's good too. And then I'll just write the whole paper. And then the paper only makes sense if I can actually envision the animation alongside it, right? So that's how I had to learn it first, and then I learn it later, the intricacies after writing it. But yeah, that's my learning process. It's tedious, but it's actually quite fun as long as, like, whenever I have the time, of course. Right now, for the last few months, since summer actually, I've been working on the second edition of my book, so I've had like no time to learn anything else. But I'm never, ever going to become complacent with how much I know. There's always something to know. You never know everything, and we never will. But that doesn't mean to, throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm not going to try and learn anything, right? I'm going to try and learn. I'm going to learn the fundamentals of everything. Fortunately, I guess I got lucky by choosing biochemistry first, because it's like the essence of our bodies, and it allows me to contend with a lot of these people online, most of them, because knowing that is a fundamental science, so it helps. But anatomy is something, statistical inference is the other thing. Those three things, like those are the three main things I want to learn. So yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I had a conversation yesterday with a complete idiot that has no clue about physiology. It's unbelievable. But they got through immunotherapy, and now they think they know everything. So
yeah. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. I mean, it's exactly what it is. Where the people that know the least are the ones that think they know the most, and also vice versa. That's the other part of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The people that know the most, actually, oftentimes they're really insecure about their lack of knowledge of the world, because they realize that the vast knowledge that is there to learn from the world, they actually recognize that. So
that's right.
Yeah,
exactly. Whereas the ignorant think they know everything, and they have seem to be quite popular as well. It's a weird world. It really is a weird world.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I see your channel, though, I see you do a lot of reaction videos, including Salad Boy.
Yeah,
seems to be quite popular on your channel. So do you have fun doing those reaction videos?
Yeah, so as much as it might seem like I'm really angry in those videos, I'm actually not angry at all. It's funny. After I stop recording, I'm kind of just like I'm totally fine. Just like, whatever, stop the recording, import everything. But it's actually fun for another way. Once again, for the same reason, being able to put your mind to the test is like a game. It's like, well, I mean, there's no difference between, well, I mean, there's a complete difference between a physical fight and a mental, intellectual fight. But there's a reason they're both called fights and battles or something. It's because there are still fundamental elements of those things that make them very similar to each other. And it's sort of like it's testing your abilities. It's like having a fight with the other person, and you get to test your abilities and you get to test your knowledge, and it's intense. It's like, I'm trying to find the right words for it. I feel like I've gotten the idea across, but I'm not finding the exact best words by my estimation. But it's pretty fun in that regard. It's like almost it's like being in a boxing match with like someone else, and you get to there's a reason that people like doing those things. But I get to do it every single week, and I'm like, cool. And also people will benefit from it, and they'll also be able to watch it. Like, not only will I, have that fight, but it'll also be watched by other people, and then they can give feedback on it. Like it enhances my knowledge, and that in and of itself makes it fun. It makes it really fun. But I will say that part of the reason it's fun is because it is intimidating. I mean, having to sit in front of the camera and be like, okay, I just woke up. I gotta get on my game here, and I gotta make sure I don't look and sound like an idiot in front of the camera. And I have to make sure I know what I'm going to talk about without reviewing anything. Like I purposely don't watch the videos before I react to them. Like, unless it's a really short video, so I have no choice but to, like, if people recommend it to me, I have to, like, click on it, and then I watch it. Then, yes, I've watched it. But, yeah. But, like, it also, it makes it far more authentic for the viewer, because the viewer, it's their first time watching the video, too. So if I haven't watched it either, it's like they're watching it with me. So they're reacting for the first time, but also I am, and that makes it far more fun for them, as opposed to if they know that I've watched the video, and especially if I did the videos like where I watched the whole thing and then I paused it and like made notes to take it at certain points. Like it's not going to be as fun for the viewer, I don't think. So it's far more intense whenever it's the first time watching.
It validates what they're feeling as well, because you're reacting with them. Like they're getting the same reaction, and they think, "Oh, you idiot, Saladino." I get that. That's good.
Yeah. So I have been doing I've been doing the reaction videos, but I will try and expand my content at some point in terms of the variety of it. I've talked to people about that before, and it's in the works. So yeah.
Okay. So what are your goals for your channel then?
The goals for the channel have been already occurring, but of course the main goal is just to continue the goal that has already been attained right now, which is just educating people in an entertaining way and giving power to the people, because there's really no difference between education and power. And I know the word power is something that especially in modern day, especially America, people are like guilty about power itself. Like power is a bad thing. Power is necessarily tyrannical. Power is necessarily, oppressive. And I keep trying to tell people, like, no. It's what you do with power that makes it either bad or good. And it still doesn't make it power bad or good.
Why people don't see the difference is because powerful positions around the world always attract tyrannical people. Unfortunately, that's all it is. It's not the position itself that makes them. It's not power that corrupts. It's just people. Corrupt people are attracted to powerful positions.
Yeah,
and they get confused with that position.
Yeah, and that's I try to tell people that power itself is not a bad thing. So yes, I am trying to empower people with knowledge so that they can actually fight back against these, misanthropic institutions. Because at the end of the day, that's what they are. I'm not denigrating privatized industries. I'm denigrating the profit incentive and the profit motive for the main industry that is concerned right now in my speech right now, which is the mainstream medical establishment, primarily the pharmaceutical industry, actually. Yeah. Primarily them, because they are in the business of designing drugs of selling drugs. So if their profit is getting money from drugs, then why would they make a product that is designed to fix completely an illness? That's right. And therefore, why would they also promote ideologies or diets even that may or may not actually ameliorate the issue before they even have to take a drug in the first place?
That's right.
So I'm trying to empower people that are sick and taking drugs a lot of times too, whether it be statins, whether it be blood pressure medications, and acid reflux medications, to go back to, me having to take them, or being prescribed them. I want them to get off of this so that we can basically take away their money, remove their profit, dwindle it slowly but surely, and also allow these people to actually have a valid reason for doing so. They have the arguments in their arsenal, right? Yeah, so it's not, it's not just them doing it just because, if people ask them about it, they actually have a way of articulating why they are doing it. That's what I want to do.
That's the thing. There's a big difference between having the knowledge and being able to argue a point.
Right. And it's difficult. It's difficult to argue points. That's why, Yeah, and that's
especially
why
when you're arguing against stupidity and people that who will actually reference like things that they're pretty much opinion pieces that they always think is science. You know, it's very difficult. You can't argue against stupid. It's if you just, all you can do is plant the seed and give them, if you have the knowledge or the ability to argue a point, it makes a very big difference. And it certainly makes you more confident in that whether you sway the person or not, at least you know you're right.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's why eventually I do plan on doing debates. The problem is, well, the problem with that is actually it's multifaceted. First of all, I do still have the whenever there is an intense situation occurring, I actually do still have pain in my stomach. Still, it's much reduced. But when it's like really tense and you're about to do something live, like it can be really difficult for me, and it can therefore addle me a little bit. Because yeah, I was just gonna say that there's still that emotional dysregulation thing, that the pain that occurs. So the problem with that is that can, even though it's like I'm still functional with it, it can still prevent me from thinking as clearly. So I don't want to take the chance of that because that will influence my debate performance. Yeah. That, and also trying to determine who is worthy of a debate or not. For example, I would never debate someone like Vegan Gains. I refuse to do that. Because
I can do more push-ups than you.
You're right. Like why would I waste my time with a debate on that? Like, you could make the argument that, oh yeah, that would get you views and therefore money, but that's not why I do the videos that I do. I don't do it for the money. I don't do it for the money. I'm trying to use the money that I get from it to, benefit my life, of course, but I'm not going to do it surely, like merely for, views and clicks. Like it has to be worthwhile, And I'm also not going to do a debate with someone that I think is not going to offer good faith argumentation, like Nick Hebert. I've had qualms with even trying to debate him. Okay. Nick Hebert, I don't think is a good faith person when it comes to that. I don't think that so at all. He's actually said that, nature is a bad place, and that we should replace nature with human infrastructure, and we should also basically.
That's the kid that debated. Was it
Sean Baker?
Name? Sean Baker. That's it.
Yeah.
That was insane.
Yeah.
Like, he wants to cover the entire world with human infrastructure because animals don't have the moral integrity to not kill each other.
Right, exactly. So it's like, why would I feel like I can instead get away with just doing a video on Nick or something and not actually do a debate. But it's like,
I think so.
There's
That's just insanity.
Yeah. It's like there are other people that I'd be willing to debate, sure. But that's the other difficult thing. And he said recently on Twitter that I'm running from him because he did offer me the debate, whatever. And also, most of the time, if you watch his videos, at least his past videos, whenever they were uploaded, it's just a way, it's point scoring with him. It's not actually trying to descry the truth and purvey it. And so it's like, if you don't have that same goal in mind, if you can't operate on the same foundation, like we are trying to discover the truth and try and get to that, why would I debate in the first place, right? Yeah, so sure. That's another thing that I've had questions about. But anyway, yeah, I do have, once again, I have other video ideas that are, video styles that I'm wanting to implement soon. And we're planning on doing that starting the new year. So, yeah.
So have you got a fehave minutes? I just want to go over a few points if you got time.
Yep, definitely.
All right, cool. All right, so like you were talking about, it must have been pretty hard for you, like your mother and your stepfather said it like it's all in your head. And after repeated tests, you sort of start to believe that. So, what was it that really kept you going then? Like if you started to feel like that, what was it that you eventually just said, well, I have to keep trying?
I think it's because I don't know how to give up. I really don't know how. I feel the only thing that was giving me meaning was continuing to push through suffering. That was really what it was. And I recognized that consciously. And so I thought, well, as much as I had those depressive episodes, it's not like I was ever going to give up. I never really contemplated suicide. I thought about it, but not actually like thought about it in the way that many people think. What I mean by I thought about it was, wow, I wonder if someone else in my position would consider doing it. Like it was just the thought was going through my head, but not because I was considering it. I was like, wow, I was thinking, why would this be a valid reason for me to do it if I did decide? It was stuff, but I never even remotely considered it because I was like, that's just not an option. And so what kept me going was, it was hope. It was the thought that, and perhaps it was chimeric at the time. It was illusory or something, but it was something that I just kept thinking to myself, well, there's a way out. Even if I can't see it, there's got to be a way out. I'll get through it. And I actually, I know this will be contentious, and this is not me shaming anyone that does fall into this pit, but I think that it is, because I completely understand it, but I think the other thing that stopped me from getting into those episodes of just complete despondence was I think of it as immoral to give up when you're going through suffering. And it doesn't mean that I don't understand why people do that. And it's not, and again, that's why I preface and said I don't shame people that have given up. I'm not saying I don't do that, but I myself couldn't allow myself to do it. I was like, that is the last thing that I'm going to do. You don't roll over, you don't give up, you push through. And so that voice was in my head, and that's what kept me up and running. And eventually, here I am, right? Like it worked. And so, that's the thing that really kept me going, was actually turning my suffering into meaning, right? But also it was something I just now thought of. I had done a lot of things in my life up to that point that were not very great things, to put it lightly. And this might sound masochistic, but it's not. Some people might understand this. It was far easier for me to withstand that pain thinking that I deserved it, because it actually felt like the pain had meaning itself. And so I actually blamed myself a lot for the things that I'd done in the past. Now, whether I should have done that or not, that's up for debate. And I don't think that I should have. Now that I'm more clear-minded. But what I will say is that it did have it had a beneficial effect. There was a silver lining to that, meaning that the pain didn't hurt as bad because it actually felt like, well, it was coming for me, right? So you hear a lot of people when they're the worst. The people that feel the worst when they're suffering are the ones that are the woe is me types, because they think, well, I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I suffering when I don't have any reason to? And they suffer the most. But when you undertake it, it's actually pretty, in a way, it's really liberating. But first of all, I undertook the pain itself, but I also thought in my mind that I deserved it. And those two things actually pushed me through. So the first thing I would encourage people to do, the second thing I would not encourage you to do, don't just say that you deserve the pain, right? I'm not saying to do that, but it was just a convenient effect that was kind of, it was something I never really expected to happen. A lot of people, whenever I say it, I feel like they may not, they probably don't expect me to say that either, but it is the case. It is the truth. So no, don't blame yourself for your pain that you're going through. Don't do that. But do the first thing that I said, which is, undertake the suffering and do something with it to try and push through it. That's always the way out.
Yeah, I agree. I think anyone goes through situations like that, they always have the thought, but how long is this going to last, sort of thing. We want to just end it, just let it be over with, sort of thing. But at the same time, like when I was, I had my days as well. It was like I never thought actually like how would I do it, sort of thing. It was always like just die and get it over and done with. Either crap or get off the pot, sort of thing. Why continue? But there was always like a moment later, you'd be thinking, what I'm going to do in the future, because there's always that hope there. It's like I still made plans for when this is over. I still made plans for what I want to do because even through my toughest period, I still had things I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's having, and it can be. It doesn't have to be a big thing either. It can be just you just feel like you want to live on the beach, or you want to go somewhere, or you just want to see something. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but just having things that you want to do, I think, is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the final note that I'll add there is the thing that was going through my head the whole time was I refuse to take myself out. Like it was like I refuse to do that. It doesn't feel right. It feels weak. It feels like and it's just like, no, I'm gonna do something with the suffering. I will let life take me out, not me. Right. Yeah. So that's the other thing that I was just as much as I was anticipating the death, not in a good way, like I was like hoping for it, but I was I was anticipating the death because I thought it was happening or it was going to happen. As much as that was the case, I wasn't going to let it be my hand. I was going to let it be something else. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to let it just be the sickness, but I was wondering why, when it was why it was taking so long. If you're just going to do it, do it. If not, let's do something else.
Yeah.
So that was the same for me.
Yep.
Now, talking about I got your vagus nerve and things like that. Interesting. Have you ever thought about trying things? I know a lot of it was due to inflammation. Obviously, beforehand, you were pretty much on a standard Western diet. That I would think would be the source of all that inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So diet related, and I think it's the same for all of us. It's whether you think you're doing everything right, because obviously the food industry, the fitness industry, it's all pharmaceutical, and it causes a lot of problems, and it takes decades. Honestly, usually it takes decades but you were quite young. Have you thought about doing certain things like breath work? Have you ever done breath work?
So they promote that at the clinic, sort of, in passing, because since they focus on the prolotherapy aspect of it, they mainly focus on that, but they do offer things like that. They suggest things like that. Me personally, I haven't actually done breath work. What I did do was something that it costs a lot of money, but I actually bought at the time. I bought a vagus nerve stimulator. So you would put the ear, like they had like earbuds in, and so you could actually play your music through it, but it would mimic anytime, like it would actually go along with your music. So the beat of the music, it would stimulate your vagus nerve through the ear canal, and it was supposed to help regenerate those nerves. Because similarly to the way that this treatment regenerates your ligaments, if you put some stimulation there, then you can cause healing and proliferation of the area. It seemed to it had an effect on me, but it didn't have the absolute greatest effect because I think this was actually pre-treatment. So I was already looking into this stuff before I even went to the clinic. And when I went to the clinic, once again, they did promote things like breath work, and they talk about how even talking stimulates your vagal tone. Yeah. It's a lot of things stimulate it because the vagus nerves, I mean, it affects everything. Like I said, it affects your swallowing. It affects your pupil dilation and constriction. It affects your hearing. It affects your balance in a way. Like it's crazy how much it affects. But yeah, I haven't personally tried it. No, and it's because I sort of have this rigid approach where I think of breath work, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that I need to get the primary stuff out of the way first before that breath work will even do anything significant. I think it's like a finalizing step, and I think I might be wrong, maybe. I have tried to talked about something called belly breathing, which is a form of breath work. And that is something I just tried to do it one time, and it seemed to actually make me feel better. I'm not kidding. It did. Yeah. Albeit temporary, because the problem is, I think what is influencing my aversion here is because not aversion of the act itself, just doing it right now.
Yeah.
Is because I tried so many things beforehand that worked temporarily, but they went right back to the way they were because the root issue wasn't fixed yet. Yeah. That being what I've been getting fixed at the clinic. And so every time that I hear people that I've been recommended somatics before, which many people have heard of before as well. I write it down, and I actually have a note of all the things that I've been recommended, because I don't have a natural aversion to it, like as being pseudoscientific or something. It's because but I just haven't tried it yet, because every time that I've tried any of those things, of the things that I have tried, of those recommendations, they haven't fully fixed the issue, because I've been, like, the root issue is still being fixed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I take note of all of it. And again, that the breath work, even just that one that I did, it seemed to actually have an effect. So I'm not averse to it per se. I'm averse to putting too much emphasis on that over the other treatments that I'm getting. And I'm not saying you implied that's what I should be doing.
No.
Yeah.
I believe in a combination. I don't think, like, it's not any one thing that causes these chronic illnesses, and it's not any one thing that's going to correct it. So I have a couple of videos where I did, different life hacks. I suppose they call them life hacks, but routines and habits that I like to cultivate.
Yeah.
Breath work is something that I started to try and learn how to breathe again to start with, and then it sort of progressed from there. But I think that you may have only felt like it's only going to give you so much, but when it's a little bit, like, even if it's only like 5%, if you do a few things in combination, that 5% can really add up, can really make a big difference.
Yeah,
it's like if you go from keto to carnivore, for example, that extra 10% can make a really big difference to your health.
Yeah. No, you got a point, and you're right about the breath work being something that it might very well be a problem for most people, because the thing is most people breathe through their chest nowadays, and they're really stressed out. Yeah, and that's actually something, the mouth breathing thing. So I mean, I don't know if you have read my book before. I know that you. So in chapter 1, I talk a lot about the paleoanthropology, like our history in anthropology, and how the structures of our body have started to slowly degenerate. You can think of it as, we not only have we just gotten smaller. I mean, there were injuries that were starting to occur as a result of the agrarian revolution, ostensibly. The things like, there's things that were happening with the occiput. There's like there's lesions on the top of the head and stuff like that. The thing that I talk about, though, is that there's this new epidemic of mouth breathing, though, as a result of poor tongue posture, as a result of jaw malformation, and also poor feeding in the first few years of infant life. Yeah. And that's something that I have been afflicted by. It actually has it's been really difficult for me the last few years. I've really started to pay attention to it, to even breathe through my nose for long periods of time during sleeping. So in the daytime, I have no problem doing it. It's whenever I go to sleep, it feels like there's so much pressure in my nose. But if I put my thumb at the very top of my palate and push up, then it's totally fine. It's totally fine. So I've been working with a natural, like I don't know what you call them. Like, I think maybe you can call them a holistic dentist, because they're not mainstream, right? They're traditional. They use traditional techniques and all that stuff. And they're about an hour and a half away from here. And I've been getting this device, and I've talked about this before on Blaze V's channel, which you may have heard of him before. Yep. He was recently on Bart's channel. He asked me about this, and I'm getting this device. It's not cheap, but it's an ALF device, and you put it at the top of your mouth, and it's supposed to cause your tongue to rest at the very top of your mouth, like always. And you keep it in all the time, unless you eat food, and you can take it out. You don't have to, actually, though, unless it's like something really crunchy, but usually in a carnivore, you're not eating a lot of crunchy stuff, right? You're eating chewy stuff, perhaps, so maybe take it out for that. But anyway, you take it out, you keep it in for the most part. And what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to fix your tongue posture to the point where if you do decide to take it out like 3 years later, it'll naturally rest at the top of your mouth. And over the course of the next few years, what'll, again, a convenient effect of that, a bonus, is that it'll change the structure of your face. It'll change the jaw structure. It's basically, if you've heard of mewing before, that's like a sort of Gen Z term, I think, but it's getting into the millennial crowd. It's getting more mainstream. If you want to call carnivore mainstream in the space that we're in, which is arguable. But it's getting more traction. There's a reason that it changes your facial structure. Just by changing your tongue posture, it changes your facial structure and opens up your sinus cavities. It makes your tongue a lot stronger in and of itself. If you look at like African tribal populations that speak Khoisan languages, which are the languages that incorporate many tongue clicks, the reason that they're able to do them so loudly is because of the strength of their tongue, because the tongue itself putting pressure against the palate, it physically widens the roof of the mouth, and it changes their entire facial structure. And so we're also having an epidemic of that's causing mouth breathing. It's causing swallowing issues. It's causing, hyoid bones are supposed to rest more so up here, but now they're sunken down here. I'm afflicted by this, and I don't pretend that I'm not, but fortunately there are ways to fix that. And I'm in the midst of doing that. Like now that I've woken up to all this stuff. So like I also have Invisalign is another thing that a lot of people use instead of braces nowadays. That actually messed up my arch. So I don't have a wide arch. It made it even worse. I have a very narrow one because they pushed all my teeth together in a way that they should not be pushed together. So I have a very narrow arch. It goes way back, my smile is supposed to be wider and everything. The ALF device that I'm getting is supposed to fix that as well. But the bonus is the aesthetics of it, of course. Like, of course, everyone wants their face to look better, right? But the reason I'm getting it is actually not for that. It's for the health effects that it can have on you because of the way that it affects the structures of your body over time. So that's another thing. Like we're dealing with so many issues. And yes, the reason we brought this up was because of the breathing. Like we breathe through our chests, we breathe through our mouths, and we have so many structural issues. We have a downward and inward culture. We sit in a bunch of cushy chairs with our arms in all the time. And believe it or not, there's an epidemic of people with the CCI condition that I was talking about, where it looks like on an X-ray that they have. Well, it doesn't look like they have it. They do have it. They have whiplash. People in my generation, really young people, are having whiplash with straight curves in their neck because of the fact that. And it looks like, if you ask anyone that looks at these X-rays, I was actually told this by my chiropractor before I went to Florida for treatment. They asked me if I was in a car accident because it was so severe. But they ask them all the time now. I've asked my chiropractor, I said, how many people, like people my age, to come in now? He goes, a lot more now. Like a lot more come in, and they also
telling people, that sitting in a chair all day is the worst thing you can do for your body.
Yep, and it's because these people are developing that condition because they're looking down at phones and they're looking forward at computers, and people think that this is pseudoscience, but it's not. There's a real thing that if you look down at the ground or at your phone, usually in this case, all the time, what you do is you stretch the ligaments out, which is normal, but it's not normal to have that occur 24/7. And so what happens is eventually they start to be damaged. The ligaments start to become inflamed and they start to erode, and then you get instability in the neck and you lose your curve. You usually lose your curve first, and then you get instability in the neck.
Yeah, the problems, they don't see it in the West, but these are, some of the problems that you see. Like, this is a really good example. In Japan, a lot of rice field workers, because they are hunched over all day long, planting rice and, harvesting rice and things like that before they have machinery. Some really older generation, you see them walking around, they cannot stand up straight. They literally are walking bent over at a 90-degree angle because they can't sit up straight. They can lie down, that's fine, but when they stand up, they are literally walking at a 90-degree angle because they just, because those ligaments are developed in such a way they just can't straighten themselves out.
Yep.
It's corrective. You can correct it, but it takes years of work.
Years. And that's something that I'm trying to raise awareness of in my book as well. That my book did not focus exclusively on that or really put too much emphasis on it, but there's a whole part of chapter 2 that's about that. And then there's also a part in chapter 4 about it as well. But the reason I brought it up was not just because of the looking down at phones all the time. It's because if that can happen to your neck, if you stretch the ligaments in your neck out that much, imagine what that can do to like your ribs and your chest if you're sunk into a chair all the time.
That's right.
And so I've been trying to raise awareness about it. And fortunately, I sit in a chair. I unfortunately sit far too much still. But that's because I haven't received enough treatment yet to the point where I can actually use this desk in the standing position, because this desk is what do you call that? Yeah. So I can stand up at this desk, but since I haven't received enough treatment for my spine yet, it's still like I don't have the strength, ligamentous strength yet, but eventually I will. And that's whenever I will start standing like the majority of the time. And I've made great strides with respect to fixing my posture though, even if I do still sit in a chair. But I'm having to reshape my entire body and redo everything, like erase everything that I have, every part of my development for the last at least my adolescence. Everything that happened during my adolescent years, I'm trying to reverse. And it's just, it takes a long time. It's going to take years. And I mean, given my mindset, that's actually not intimidating for me. It's actually pretty fun. I'm like, okay, I'm looking forward to it. Like, this will be fun. But yeah.
Well, the thing is too, is, people don't understand just how important the adolescent years are. Like, that's where all your development happens. When you are, puberty, growing, all this sort of thing. Those effects, what happens through those years will last the rest of your life if you don't correct it. So it's really important that you get on top of that. And you're lucky that you are young enough now that you can fix things and you can move on. So that's a good thing. That's another reason why I think breath work would help too. It's not just so much the nervous system that it helps correct, but it's really good for strength training. And I like to implement it for strength as a strength coach. I like to implement it for my strength programs as well, because you are basically, for deep breath work, you have to use your entire core for a start. Okay, so you're moving your lymphatic system, which is another great benefit. But, the 5 muscle groups for your stomach, and then you've got all those muscles around your ribs, your chest, your shoulders, and your back. All these muscles are contracting, expanding and contracting while you do a serious breath work session. It can be just as effective as a high intensity interval training session, or even a HIIT session in the gym, because it's just so intense. And especially if you're not in it's not as mobile. It's like like yourself, if you're sitting in a chair for so long, you can do these exercises, deep breath work. It's going to be really good also for strength exercises, not just the actual treating the vagus nerve and things like that. So I think it's something you'd really benefit from. But that's something for you to look at yourself anyway. So why the carnivore diet then?
So in terms of, you said why the carnivore diet? Like, why did I choose that instead? Okay, so that was after I was listening to Bart about carbohydrates. So I was starting to learn with Paul that, cholesterol might not be so bad for you, even if it's LDL, saturated fat, stuff like that, animal protein itself. But I was like, the carbohydrate thing, it just seems a little off, because Paul based a lot of his arguments on something called ancestral consistency. And that was something that I'd never actually really thought of before. With Dr. Gundry, it was all just like, oh, well, the human nutrition science says this, right? But we never really, it made sense that we should appeal to probably, not a tradition, because that's technically a fallacy, but to what our genes have evolved to withstand dietarily. Because that's just a cellular biological fact. They're most adept at dealing with what they've dealt with, right? Well, I started to hear that argument out, and I was like, okay, well, then meat makes a lot of sense, right? Because, we ate meat for millions of years. What didn't make sense to me was the fruit. Because, at first it made a little sense, because I went, well, okay, well, yeah, of course, we had some fruit that grew in fruit season and stuff like that, but Paul's arguments never made sense, because he wanted to say fruit was ancestrally consistent, but he's having it every single day in copious amounts. So even back then, once again, it didn't make sense. I was like, what? But I was like, okay, fine. Okay. And I was having kiwis and plums. I wasn't having the big juicy fruit. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't having pineapple and mass, like the giant apples they have in stores nowadays that never used to be that big before. Yeah. But I was having kiwis, and I was having some honey and stuff. And I was like, I just don't, it doesn't feel right though. But when Bart started talking about carbohydrates while also simultaneously talking about ancestral consistency. And also he started talking about stable nitrogen and carbon isotope analyses, when they use that mass spectroscopy to actually measure the isotope ratios in bone. I went, okay, well, that makes a lot more sense. So it was actually it was a continuation of Paul's logic. It just branched off. Yeah. It was using Paul's foundation, but actually applying it truthfully and consistently, because he wants to talk about ancestral consistency and then to justify his ancestrally inconsistent diet. So it was like, okay, well, what if we use that same tenet, but actually were ancestrally consistent? Well, it seems like that makes more sense to me, and Bart made it make more sense to me as well. And so that's why I really started looking into it. But then I started looking into it even more. I was like, okay, well, what about fiber though? Like, what does Bart have to say about fiber? Because he seems to make a lot of sense about all this other stuff. So what does he have to say about fiber? And then I started listening more and more to him about fiber. And then he usually refers people to Paul Mason about fiber. Yeah. And so I looked at his videos on fiber and I went, that's really interesting. And so I was like, okay, so now I'm comfortable with not eating fiber. And also, given the fact that I'm not dead yet and I haven't really been eating that much fiber, well, it makes sense that it wouldn't be required at least. So I'm not really worried about dying. And so anyway, then it just made me, after learning what they were saying about fiber, it made me more comfortable with the idea of not having fiber, because now I didn't think that I was at least missing out on anything beneficial. First it was accepting that it wasn't necessary, and then it was accepting that there's probably nothing beneficial about it. If anything, there's probably something exactly the opposite to that. Abrasive to the interior nervous system. They always tout fiber as being something beneficial because it increases mucus secretion, which protects the gut lining more, which is true, right? Because mucus does that with cells, except, well, why would fiber increase mucus secretion though? Is it perhaps because it's abrading the stomach lining? I don't, is that not clicking in their head?
It's clicking backwards.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, like that's like saying that if you cut your hand, the blood clotting that happens on your hand is designed to protect your skin. So therefore you should cut your hand a lot. Well, no, exactly. But the reason it's there to protect your skin is because you damaged it though. Anyway, it's like, eat fiber because it causes mucus secretion, which protects your gut. Well, anyway, that was one thing that I was learning. And then I learned more from Bart about cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease. And that was something that was actually pretty interesting, because there were a lot of things that I was learning from Bart about that topic that were actually completely antithetical to Paul. And I say this in my videos in response to Paul all the time. The way in which he reaches his conclusions are completely backwards. Like, by his logic, he should be saying that cholesterol is not a good thing, but he says it's a good thing. Like, a lot of time, I'm like, it's just so backwards. Like, he says a lot of things about cholesterol that are just not true, but he still believes that it's completely innocuous to eat cholesterol. So I'm like, well, frankly, I don't care what your conclusion is. I care about the logic you did to get there, because I don't care if you got the right, for example, I don't care if you got the right answer on a math test. If you did the logic completely wrong to get there, then I'm not going to trust you to do the next problem properly. It doesn't make any sense. So that was, I was basically plugging a bunch of holes with Bart's videos. I was like, okay, well, now I'm actually learning the real stuff. Good. Let me write this paper. And then it was like vitamin C. Stuff that I'd never learned from Paul, because Paul said that you just get enough vitamin C from fruit, then you don't have to worry about it, right? But it was like, right, but why don't you have to worry about it on a 100% carnivore diet? And then I learned stuff from him, and everything made so much sense. And I thought that the more, especially with like vitamin C, Bart talked about the chemistry of our bodies a lot. And I was like, wow, I mean, he knows like how the muscles work, and he knows all this stuff. I want to know how this stuff works, because it made me, the more I learned the stuff from him, it made me really appreciative of the human body. And therefore it piqued my interest about it. I was like, how does this stuff work? Like, I want to learn more about it. And so that's what got me to looking up that biochemistry course in the first place. I was like, well, that's like the essence of the body, all the chemistry of the body. I'm going to learn it here. Of course, now that
that's the problem with a lot of these influencers, like Paul Saladino, is that they don't understand the mechanisms, and they don't really care. Yeah, they don't really care. So they just make up, they don't care how they actually get to the result, but they just go straight to the result, sort of thing. They don't care about the fact that, these carbohydrates that, I mean, he might he might look fit and healthy and everything like that, but I bet you 10 to 1 he's got fatty liver disease.
Right.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, I mean, it has to do with his exercise routine, I would suspect.
Yeah, that's right. Plus, the climate. I'm a big believer in circadian biology is another thing they don't understand as well. If you're in a hotter climate and you're surfing all day, then yes, you can get away with eating a certain amount of carbohydrates. All right, and you may not get fat because he's fit and active, but that doesn't mean he's healthy either.
Exactly.
I was exactly the same. I was living in a very hot climate. I was living in Japan. I was very fit. I was very active. I was lean. I thought I was healthy, but I was, even then when I was working, pretty much 7 days a week. I was hitting the gym most of those days, and I was still lifting very heavy when I was stage 4 cancer. So it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that you are healthy. I looked very much like that. So I was very fit, very lean.
Exactly. Just this is what I say in my videos. Weight and muscular fitness is not the only criteria of health. They're not. I mean, it's a rich, multifaceted issue of health. If that's not, you can't just focus on what you look like on the outside, right? It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
That's the problem with people that don't understand the mechanisms involved. Because, and like I was the same, we all come from a place of ignorance, and whether you're educated or not, it doesn't really matter, because the problem is, education, universities they're all teaching the wrong stuff, all teaching crap. Like even before I was diagnosed, I had 3 or 4 checkups beforehand, and like you're talking about with normal markers, you had normal blood markers. My blood markers were abnormal, completely abnormal. But I was fit and lean and strong, so my doctors just said it must be something wrong with the blood. So they just ignored it.
Yeah. So it's just that's just a lot of people do not realize the sophistication of health. So
how the body works is incredibly interesting. But what's more interesting is the resilience, the ability for the body to heal. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
What I still don't understand though is the level of mentality that people that just blindly follow people like Salad Boy and think, oh wow, he's right about everything, because they don't question it. Like you said, like, how do you get to these answers? This is what's important. It's the journey to get to these answers, not so much the message. I think this is the biggest problem with people, is that they get dogmatic. They feel like they don't want. It's like it's easier to convince people of the lie than it is to convince them they've been lied to.
Lied to, yes, exactly.
And they will defend it to the death because they don't want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. There's pride.
That's the problem. With myself, honestly, I have no loyalty to any diet. I have no loyalty to carnivore diet. It's interesting to me at the moment, and I'm using it because it works. But if I found something better, I would use it, because you have to go where, what we will go with, what feels best, what actually works. Don't get so dogmatic in that, thinking that this is the only thing that works, but obviously, so far, everything points towards this being very effective. So
yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because that was actually the premise of my book. It's not a carnivore book. It's not a carnivore book. It arrives at that conclusion, but the entire purpose of the book is to try and, with a clean slate, you wipe off everything. You wipe everything out of the way. All these conclusions that have been ossified over the course of, I don't know, decades, centuries even, you wipe it clean, wipe the slate clean, and you think, okay, let's talk about how we should go about assessing what the proper human diet is, if there even is one in the first place, if there's just one. And then we cover that too in the book. But also, let's assess the methods, and then using those methods, let's see where we end up while responsibly adhering to those methods. That is the book. Like that's absolutely the book. And then there's an entire chapter in the book that is dedicated to dispelling the myths that we've been told with truth. I mean, it's not just us saying myth. This is a myth because it's a myth, right? Like, it's just because it goes against our ideology. It is actively disproving these myths as myths. So anyway,
that's right. And like you said, there may be more than one. I mean, there are people out there that have different genomes to us, who developed in different areas, such as the Inuit in the Arctic, for example. So you have to be open-minded enough to explore these things. Don't be so dogmatic about it. But anyway, fantastic, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time. It actually went almost 2 hours, but the name of your book, was it Contraindicated?
Yeah. And clearly, the elephant in the room was I clearly derived inspiration of the title of that book from Bart after watching him for so long. But I thought I didn't just do it just to try and copy him. I thought that it was actually a really fitting title for a book like that. It was one of the first things that came to my mind. And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, let's go ahead and roll with it and see how it works. It seems like everyone has been enjoying, the book, and also, they're not really averse to buying it because of the title or something. It's like, I know that I get told that I'm a
great title.
Yeah.
It's specific. It's to the point, and it's true. It is contraindicated to the dogma that we keep being taught and keep being fed. So I think it's great. But it's really great to see young people like yourself, and I think there's another young girl in Europe. I think you interviewed her recently. It's just brilliant to see you guys out there, and it's sort of you get like I was talking about this conversation I had yesterday. It really lowers your expectations of humanity, honestly, when you talk to idiots. But people like yourself restore it, so it's a good thing to see.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've been working with Stephanie. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Stephanie, that's her name. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway.